What's up? Seth Mosley here. We're on the Made It in Music podcast, and today we've got an amazing one with none other than mega producer John Fields. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about who John Fields is if you don't already know. But before we jump in, if you've been enjoying listening to the Made It in Music podcast, we'd love to hear your feedback. Leaving a review is one of the best ways that you can do that. Your reviews help us to continue to serve you the best that we can. So if you take just a few minutes, go to your favorite podcast platform, leave us a review. We would really love that. It really does help us to keep growing. So thanks so much to all of you who have left a review. We really do read them all and appreciate all of the feedback. So like I said today, we've got John Fields. John is an internationally recognized multi-platinum writer, producer, and mixer who's worked with some of the biggest names in the music industry. From pop acts like Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, Miley Cyrus, Pink, and Backstreet Boys, to rock bands like Jimmy Eat World, Switchfoot, Goo Goo Dolls, and Lifehouse, to dance and electronic artists like Harmar Superstar and Cut Copy. John's also a multi-instrumentalist and successful co-writer, having written songs with Dan Wilson, Nick Jonas, Selena Gomez, and others. John will occasionally hit the road with artists he's played bass with, like Nick Jonas and The Administration, the Rembrandts and Soul Asylum. I'm excited to find out what we're going to learn today about record producing from John Fields. Please welcome John to the Made It in Music podcast. What's up, John?
What's up, Seth? How you doing, man?
How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Just, just finished a great holiday weekend. Or it wasn't a holiday, but it was my birthday. So we went on a birthday trip and had a great time.
Nice. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Is it? I guess I'm probably not allowed to ask what birthday it is. I'll just skip through that.
I was born on 9/11. I can tell you that. So
really,
yeah, but I was the original 9/11.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us out there.
Yeah, you got to have like a support group for that or something.
Yeah, it's definitely like a dueling, emotional day.
Man, well, I'm so excited to have you on. Thanks for making the time. I'd love to just jump in at the top. Would you just tell us a little bit about your story and how you first started getting into recording and producing?
Sure. Back in the late 70s, when I was a little tyke, I lived in Boston. I grew up in Boston, and I had this awesome Uncle Steve who lived in Minneapolis, who was a drummer. And, as when I was like really small, he was kind of a drummer in a wedding band, and turned that into probably the first mobile DJ entertainment service, possibly I don't know if it's in the country or whatever, but this is like mid 70s. He was doing this mobile DJ thing, playing records at weddings and parties. And I kind of grew up with this tech Uncle Steve, who was a kick-ass drummer, and I worshipped him, basically. And I just knew that I wanted to do what he did. And at some point in about early 1980, he had a huge hit song, his own band, Lips Inc. And the song was called Funky Town. And he wrote, produced, and was the artist with the singer Cynthia Johnson. And it became a number one song for 4 weeks in the summer of 1980. So this is like sixth grade for me, just freaking out. I mean, we're talking, like when that was number one, Paul McCartney was number two, Pink Floyd was number three, Blondie was number four, Ambrosia was number five. This is like the heart of like when music was music, when chords were chords. Not just the four chords that they use today, but all the other ones.
Yeah, there's plenty of options out there.
So that was my first kind of intro to, wow, music is a thing you can do. And of course, this is my mom's little brother. So, that opened my mom up also to like having a musician kid and not sending me to law school or, whatever. She wasn't necessarily worried about that because her little brother had really made it in music, if you will.
No pun intended there.
Just to bring it back home.
There you go.
But, so that piqued my interest around there. And then I just loved listening and studying records. And I had this really cool mentor in Minneapolis who just kept pushing me, even though I was terrible at I got a drum set, I got a piano, I got a guitar. It's just, as everyone is, you're pretty bad when it starts, but you just got to power through it. And he would send me occasionally little gifts, like in about 7th or 8th grade, he sent me a 4-track cassette recorder. And that's when I started overdubbing and just going nuts on it and just trying to figure out how to do it. And that's when you start taking apart records by Van Halen and Michael Jackson and Prince, and just like, how are they doing that? Like, what is that keyboard sound? What's that little toot toot thing that's going on? So that really got me into the minutia of music, and also the first time you're singing your own harmonies, trying to figure out like, what is a harmony? Why does that work? Why doesn't that work? And this is no music theory, no piano lessons, just totally in the basement, figuring it out on your own. And that's kind of how it started. So as soon as I got out of high school, I tried my best to move to Minneapolis to be near my Uncle Steve, who had a small recording studio. And when I got here when I was 19, he just gave it to me, essentially. And,
Wow.
And I dove in and figured it all out. And he wasn't that much of a tech. He was more of a producer, not so much of an engineer, more of like a producer and musician. So he wasn't like, get a Neve mic pre, or, it was not about compression or things that, out of phase on the under snare, none of those things. We're talking like just overdubs and like just main concepts. And it was, so that stuff I kind of had to figure out on my own. And that's why my early recordings are awful. As are everyone's, but no, now everyone's are probably awesome because they have presets.
But hey, man, you hit on a really good point, and honestly, like nowadays, it should almost be required learning material for you to start out on some sort of a 4-track cassette recorder. I don't even know what the version of that is nowadays, like a little Tascam hard disk recorder or something. I mean, that was like my first thing was exactly that. It was the boombox where you had two tape decks. It wasn't even 4-track. You just recorded on one side and then popped it in the other one.
Yep.
And so you've got to figure out arrangement. Like nowadays, there's really no thought to arrangement, or there is with really good producers who are up and coming, but a lot of the kids who it's like Mr. Potato Head production, where you just take something from Splice. Oh, that sounds cool. Throw it on there and then add 400 more tracks to it. There's no thought as to, do we need these other 400 things, or did we get the sound right on the first one? So I love that you hit on that. And man, if there's a production course out there that, would teach kids to literally just start from the ground up like that, I think that'd be a good foundation.
Well, I think that really comes from listening and learning, and now the problem is the music is so grid. The current, top 40 scene is just so cookie cutter and grid. I'm not, it's not everything, but, just pretty much you're rarely going to get a song that slows down, speeds up, or has, there's not even many songs with real drums on them at all.
Yeah.
Or if they were, they're so processed that they don't sound like real drums.
Right.
So, not that, and that's the other thing is the young generation, do they even care about creating a live rock band style arrangement of, with guitars, bass, drums, and keyboards?
No, and I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think they know the difference. It's
dying art, as they call it. I always say that, like, when rock and roll came in the late 50s with Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Elvis and so forth, before you can see like the Benny Goodman band clarinet player going, "Cat, these kids, they don't know what they're doing. They don't even read music. They're just, this is terrible." These are really schooled musicians from the late 40s and early 50s that are now getting older and going, "What am I going to do?" Sax players and all that, who play jazz. And then it's not that jazz was over, but it just, when rock and roll came in, it just kind of engulfed.
Yeah.
And it lowered the bar, to be honest, of musician entry level musician into like being pro.
Yeah.
Which I think was good for me. I definitely took advantage of that low bar. So
Hey, well, I'm personally thankful for that too. I'm very much not like the lowest grade I got in high school on any of my classes was music theory,
yeah, and
and I wish I knew more of it,
me
but
too.
I don't know what your process is. We can
It's
talk about
not.
that. It's whatever sounds good, right?
Well, I tried honestly to learn reading in high school, and it just did not click. It was like a strange foreign language to me. It never. I can, yeah, I can read through it like every boy deserves fudge.
Yeah.
Slowly, I can recognize the note, but I was never going to be able to sight read, and that that actually stopped me from following up on that education because I just wasn't fast at it. But I was fast at figuring out the chords to songs
Yeah.
and and all the background vocal parts and so forth. So I don't know if they have anything to do with each other, but
Yeah.
so I skipped out on the whole music reading thing. And of course, I was one of those guys saying, people who read music, they don't have feel. They don't, you know what? But that is so wrong.
Yeah.
That is, and it's as I started making records with people and meeting people, in my 20s, and I realized that some of the best musicians were fully schooled,
Yeah.
fully understood the whole gamut of reading and arrangement, and just
Well, we talk about that a ton. I love that you brought that point up. That I think there's this misconception that goes on around about like Nashville or LA or really any music industry town that when they hear stuff that comes out on the radio and it's four chords, they associate that with musical stupidity or it's
yeah.
too simple. But you're right. Most of these musicians like they can do that in their sleep. They can do all that stuff in their sleep. That's why we call them because you show up and you play the song for them once, they chart it,
Yep.
go in there, and it feels
Well,
great.
they're hired to make magic, as I say,
Yeah,
and because the structures are generally the same, but really, what's going to make a cool record is going to be the singer, the
yeah,
song, and hopefully some magical music parts. But
yeah,
8 out of 10 drum tracks are kind of down the same pipe.
yep, yep.
So
Yeah, you can copy paste. So you talked about moving to Minneapolis. It sounds like your uncle had a big thing to do with that, which was a smart decision on your part. So once you got there, how did you go about starting to kind of build your business as a record producer?
so that was just had a crappy studio in a paneled what looked like a CPA's office, and I cut a hole in the wall and put a window in from the hardware store myself, and put a microphone on the other side, and I just started asking friends to come over and record, and a lot of it was my own music at that point because I didn't have many friends because I had just moved from Boston to Minneapolis, and at that point my uncle had kind of checked out and started raising a family, so he wasn't really hanging out with me that much on a daily basis. So I found friends, and another thing that was happening at that time was I was playing in a cover band at night, and that was a huge, just another one. Just put that on the list of what you should be doing to school yourself on music.
Playing a
Is
cover
playing
band.
a cover band on any instrument, and you're singing backies, you're learning classics and standards, you're learning how a dance floor, what fills a dance floor, what doesn't. So that was happening on my weekends, and then occasionally I would meet, young people my age that were in bands, and I just started going out and seeing bands down in Minneapolis and meeting people my age, and that turned into inviting them over to my studio for a free session, free hang, and then I started a band. That band got gigs. You meet other bands at those gigs. You ask those guys, come on out to the studio. Let's, it's that you're just scraping, trying to get anything going.
Yeah.
And also I had business. I think I was $10 an hour back then to just record at my studio. So I was doing reggae bands. This is early 90s. And as these bands were rolling through, I was getting better at fixing just fixing their arrangements on the fly, like doing 3 songs a day. The whole record's done in 3 days,
Yeah.
because that's just what the budget was. And so I learned how to do that on the fly. And I guess that,
Man, can I jump in right there? Because
yeah,
you hit on something that I think a lot of people struggle with, up and coming record producers. When you're starting out, it's really hard to kind of find your worth. Like, what do you charge to make a record? I mean, it sounded like you just jumped in and said, "Hey, I'm $10 an hour." How did you go about kind of trying to figure that out?
I mean, that's funny. Like back then, early 90s, $10 an hour was kind of, I don't know, double minimum wage. It's like 5 for me and 5 for the studio or something. I don't know. It seemed like a good round number.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's $100 a day, pretty much, and that, for a crappy recording studio, it seemed the nice ones were going for $1,000 a day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm doing everything. I'm the engineer, I'm the producer, I'm the janitor, I'm playing all the guitars that they don't play, and just, I mean, some pretty all across the board projects. That's the thing. And then my uncle occasionally would have some of his friends and say, "You're going to do this voiceover project, or you're going to do this demo for my friend who wants to be a country singer or something." I would just do it. So that's the other thing, is just say yes always at the beginning. Yeah. And I mean, even now, it's like, try to say yes as much as possible, because yes turns into so many tribute. It just rivers go off from a yes. And a no is like, okay, nothing happens, and then they never call you again. So, but charging, it wasn't really about the money. It was just kind of like you had to charge something. And I also didn't charge everybody. There was friends who would just be free. Yeah.
So were you pretty much able to go full time in producing right when you jumped into it, or how long did it take you to build up to
Calling it producing? I wouldn't call it producing. I just well, my money was being made by gigging, playing cover band gigs. So that kind of covered the nut. And the daytime studio was just, it slowly progressed to that. A couple years, 3, 4, 5 years later, at some point, a couple years into that, my uncle Steve bought a building outside of Minneapolis, and we built a real studio in 1992. And that was the first time. I mean, I had to build it too with the carpenters, so I learned about studio construction, and then we were picking gear to put into it, and it was all kind of the budget stuff. DBX, Alesis. We had an Otari 24-track. That was like the pride and joy at that point. Yeah. And he had some microphones left over from his days, and we used those. But most of it was just what everyone else was using. Audio-Technica. If you're lucky, you'd get something like an AKG 414. That was, I think, my nicest mic. Yeah. And I do love them. And that turned into a real studio. Then, of course, the rates kind of went up a little bit because it looked nicer, and they had nice wood floors and so forth. And I was getting better as a producer, engineer, and mixer. So we just word of mouth, and then gigs started coming, and then we started a record label. That's the other thing. We started signing bands, rock bands. Wow. And I was the in-house producer, so I made the records. And none of them really were huge. There were some great records made, but that was kind of how it started for me. And then out of town people started calling, and Chicago is only 6-7 hours from here driving. So a band from Chicago came up in '98 called Dovetail Joint, and I made a record, a 1-song, 1-day record with them called Level on the Inside, and they got signed to Columbia Records. Aware Columbia Records and that was my first time really like, wow, this band got signed. It's because of the demo that we made. The demo actually turned out to be the record. We ended up making the entire record together, and we mixed it with Jack Joseph Puig in LA, who was my choice. They said, like, who do you want to mix? And I said, what do you mean? I thought I mixed. And they're like, no, you can pick anyone you want. And I said, whoa. Jack Joseph Puig for sure, because he was one of my favorites because of his two Jellyfish records that came out in 1990 and 92, which
Yeah.
are just art pieces of incredible production, writing, arranging, and mixing. So I worked with him. That's the first time I went to Ocean Way Studios in LA, and I got my first little flavor of, whoa, this is cool. This is, this was a big Focusrite console with all the Fairchilds, and I'd never even seen a Fairchild.
Yeah.
So, because Minneapolis, unlike Nashville, Minneapolis didn't have that many great studios. There was like two. There was Paisley Park, and there's another place called like Metro Studios, and that was about it for. And even then, they didn't have Fairchilds and Neve modules and stuff like that. It was still, it's Minneapolis. So,
Yeah.
but
So you ended up.
so
you
that
ended up
LA
doing
entry that's the first time, and I watched Jack mix, and I started sponging everything. So that turned into, going back home and taking those tricks. And I didn't even know about bus compression, Seth,
Wow.
until 1998. No, nobody ever said to me, put a compressor on the mix. Crazy.
That's amazing.
So
it's
and,
those little
and of
things
course,
you
then
pick
I
up.
bought an Allen Smart stereo compressor, and my whole sound changed. So
That's amazing.
it's about like just being able to get into a situation where you can watch someone else do it, and that's one thing I would say about. I do say this a lot. Like, producers do not collaborate that often with each other. Just at least in my style, producer, it's like where it's like the band comes in, you make the record. It's not like all of a sudden me and Eric Valentine are going to work together on the same project, and I'm going to see how he does it, and he's going to see how I do it. We don't watch each other. We don't watch anyone. We just do it our way. So it's unfortunately, there's not a lot of opportunity to watch other people do it and I didn't come up the intern way or assisting.
Sure.
So I didn't get to see like someone be a pro in front of me until I got to LA and watched people mix. Mike Shipley and Jack Puig were the two that really opened my eyes to like how pros do it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can definitely echo your sentiments there. I think when I moved to Nashville and started working with, I think the first mixer I worked with here was a guy named Reed Swanson, and he just letting me, generous enough to let me sit behind him and just watch what he's doing, and like just stuff like you mentioned, for people that don't know what you're talking about or maybe getting lost in the technical weeds, like on the output of a Pro Tools or Logic session, the output bus is like what everything funnels through, and if you put a compressor on it, it just makes it all glue together. So it's those little tricks, and I like you said, saw Reed doing that with his SSL, and so when you would you consider that your big break, if that's even a good way to put it, like working with that record on Columbia? Were you like kind of off to the races at that point, or what was
started right before that? There's a local group called Tina and the B-Side Movement that I produced in '97 on Sire Records, but and JJP actually mixed that one too. That was the first one in '97. Wasn't that successful, but it was the first time I got paid, and we actually went to a really awesome studio called Pachyderm, which is out in the sticks outside of Minneapolis. It's a great studio where it's famous because Nirvana made their second or In Utero there.
Yeah.
So, but it was also a really nice place. It was a residential, so it had a house that you could stay in and a studio, and you could just like camp out for a couple weeks and make a record. Did that and came back. But the break, there really wasn't a break. It just was a slow drip of projects that came in, and honestly, it was a really ripe time for the major label rock business. It was the late '90s. There was rock stations in every town, radio stations that would play records. Now there's zero. They all closed and became other formats. So, I mean, you know it. I mean, it was like just that late. It was that post grunge late. Bands are getting signed. It wasn't grid music. There was plenty of electronic music out there, but just playing guitars was cool and singing. And this is back in days. It was great. And so I happened to line up right in that. Not that I was Mr. Rock guy or anything. I actually came more from an R&B background originally. Just when I had started out, I was trying to be L.A.N. Babyface or Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, because my uncle his music skewed towards like R&B and funk. So I was all about Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Shaka Khan, Prince, Marvin, and just trying to get that going. But then when I met kids my age, they were playing rock. And I didn't even like that much rock growing up, to be honest. It just wasn't in my blood. I was more into Steely Dan and Michael McDonald and little just chordier music that was a little more complex. And Todd Rundgren and Utopia, those are my favorite bands. So, but when I met these younger guys my age, that's when I started realizing, AC/DC, this is something we need to study. And the bands that were getting signed and were working with me ended up, and that's the other thing is you end up getting in with a band and they're a rock band that has a drop D, and next thing you know, another band like that calls you because you did that record, and then you do that record, and then it just brings you down this path, and maybe that wasn't the path that you wanted to or thought you were going to go down. But that's what happened to me is Dovetail Joint, rock. I made a record called Evan and Jaron. It was kind of a rock pop record, and just other people started calling in that same genre. So I kind of dropped the funk, to be honest. I just went with what came, and that's at some point in the late 90s, I started traveling to LA a lot and got an apartment there because I wanted to participate in that scene more, but I didn't want to move like because I had an awesome studio in Minneapolis. So I just started going out to LA, and that really, I met a lot of people out there, and they kept saying, you need to be here. You need to be here. I got a manager in LA, and he's like, you need to be here. So I finally decided in 2002 to move out to LA for real, and closed up my shop here in Minneapolis and just moved it all out to LA. And honestly, within that first month or two, some of the greatest things in my career ever happened. So I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, man. Talk about that. I do want to talk about the importance of proximity in a music career to where the action is. But I also want to put a bookmark in what you had said. It sounded like you kind of came up with this one identity of who you were musically, of having this kind of funk Steely Dan influence, but then you were willing to just kind of chuck it out the window. And so many times as musicians, I see people coming up and they're very kind of have a fixed mindset about who they are, what they do. But really, to make it in music, you've kind of, like you said, you got to say yes to everything. And sometimes what becomes your calling card is something that you'd have no idea of. So
that's the thing. I have plenty of friends, who work in post-production sound right now that were in my band and never thought in a million years they'd be doing that. Commercial voiceover work, mixing 5.1 television commercials, mixing television shows. These are guys that never would think that 20 years ago, that's what I'm going to be doing. But those are the jobs that are available for professionals. It's so hard to make it as a producer engineer at this point that you got to open your mind to what else is out there. So for me, I always just wanted to do this. For me, it's about music in the studio is the most fun part of this job, and kind of working out the puzzle that is a song. So I don't know where I'm going with this other than just I followed, I remember you don't get to pick what comes your way. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it's not that I tossed out my funk and Steely Dan. It's always there. It's still there. It's just you didn't get to put it into this record because these guys don't want any keyboards on their album, But I want to put keyboards on them. I get my occasional Mellotron on there, this and that. But so that's the thing is when the offers come your way and you take them, you just don't know what's going to happen, and that's kind of how you end up where you are. That's the thing. You just have to let it happen. and hopefully you have someone to help you. Like in my case, I've had the same manager for 22 years, Frank
Wow.
McDonough, and he's incredible. And I talk to him every day, and he listens to the mixes, and we talk about the music, and we listen to the demos that people send. It's not just a guy, doing the invoicing and stuff. It's a musical shoulder to lean on,
Hmm.
and that's really been important also to me
That's
along the way.
awesome.
And he helps pick the projects
Hmm.
with me. So
Yeah. So good. So, and it sounded like he was pretty instrumental in nudging you to move out to LA.
so he managed Jack Joseph Puig at that time
Ah,
in
okay.
1997 and 98. So I met him, I think, through that, and we just kept in touch, and he knew there was something there. So, but he wasn't like, I want to manage you right now. It was this little dance that we had for a couple years. And finally I got enough projects and I said, please, please, please. I was doing my own negotiating at that point, and I'm terrible at that.
Yeah.
And finally he stepped in and said, I'm in. So, and that's great too. And it's not like all offers and all work comes through him. As you know, most of your work, I mean, at this, early on, it comes just through word of mouth. It's like
Yeah.
somebody calls you, hey man, you want to do this? And you say, yes. But now it's, there's people, obviously, I don't know most of the people that I work with until I meet them the first time, and
Yeah.
that comes through, I don't know if that's word of mouth or just, your reputation as to the records that you've done, I think is at this point kind of how it happens. But I still do work with the same people a lot over and over and over based
Yes.
on, nothing to do with do they like Switchfoot or something. It's just
Yeah.
they're people that appreciate my ear.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, would you say that just the proximity effect was a big
Oh,
key
proximity, yeah.
factor? Just like
So
when you
moving
moved to
to LA,
LA.
the thing about moving to LA was it's where the record labels are. And New York was also in New York, and you could have moved there as well, but I gambled on LA, and I think I was right because all the recording studios in New York City closed, and a lot of the labels moved to West Coast. So being there means that when someone calls and says, there's a new band, they just got signed to A&M Records or whatever it is, and can you meet today? And when you live in Minneapolis, the answer is no, I cannot.
Hmm.
And you might be the right guy to do that record, but you can't take that meeting. So now that you live in LA, you can take that meeting,
Hmm.
and you can run into people also that turn into other things. So for me, that was important. And that first month that I got there, I met a manager on a kind of a cold meeting. It was he was managing an artist named James Renauld from Canada who was signed, and he needed someone to produce and mix 2 or 3 songs. And I met with James and his manager John Lachey, and ended up getting that gig and doing that project over the next couple of weeks. And the manager was really impressed, and he also managed Switchfoot.
Hmm.
And he said, hey, I got this other band from San Diego. You should meet them, and I'd love to make, hopefully we can make a record together. And we did within a month, that first month of moving to LA. So that's the proximity thing, is like I would never have met that manager had I not moved to LA and been living there. And that means I would never have made the Switchfoot record, which turned into so much great stuff in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, now Nashville obviously is the heartbeat, one of the 2 heartbeats. I mean, LA and Nashville and London probably is what I'd say now.
Yeah.
Not
Man,
to
that's
discount Minneapolis, because that's where I live now. But at this point, I don't need to prove myself as much anymore. It's kind of like the work kind of comes regardless. I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if I'd be getting more work if I lived in LA or Nashville. Maybe so. I'm sure there'd be more people that you meet and so forth. But I'm kind of happy with where it's at right now.
Yeah, well, it's seasons. When people are starting out, like you said, it's say yes to everything. I like to, I can't claim that I coined this term, but to be able to increase the surface area of your luck,
Yeah.
basically the exposure to opportunity and to what is going to come your way. So yeah, we always tell that to people. If you want this to be your thing, and especially if you're young and single and don't have a family, like you have no reason not to try.
Absolutely. So just dive in and just get in there. But I wasn't like some sort of expert networker or anything. I'm actually pretty shy with new people, and so, but I don't know, just some great things happen, and that just shows you that even if you're shy, it's like still things can you'll run into someone that changes your life, and when you look back, like who are the people that changed your life? It's pretty crazy to think that one thing turned into this entire, just river of work.
Yeah,
So,
that one meeting, chance meeting with the Switchfoot
well, it
manager.
did. That one chance meeting did change my life. In terms of really having because I was like, I want to I loved Brendan O'Brien's work and Mitchell Froome and Albie Galutin and producers that I just worshipped, Todd Rundgren. I was like, how do they get their jobs? How does it work? And how do you get that Stone Temple Pilots record? And it was never gonna. But I watched Brendan, come up, and it was like it just was this like little etching away at it.
Yeah.
And then it ended up happening for me too. Just I've always dreamed like, well, how was it going to happen? And so it's still happening, to be honest. That you're never really satisfied with the career. You just always want more. But
yeah, man, I'd love to, just from a fan perspective, and I know it was a long time ago. You've probably answered these same questions ages ago, but the Beautiful Letdown record, in my opinion, is definitely in the top best records of all time of any genre. Like, I just think it's such a masterpiece. So yeah, again, amazing work on that. Can you talk about if nothing more than just to satisfy my curiosity, what was that process like? Was it one of those moments where you kind of knew like this is going to be a massive thing, or was it kind of just like any other record and like put it out?
No, it was not like just any other record. I met the guys at SIR Studios in LA. They were playing showcases. They were signed to a Nashville label at the time, but their LA manager, who was new for them, said, we're going to do showcases for the big LA record labels. So they played at SIR a couple nights, and they lived in San Diego, which is about a 2-hour drive from LA. And at this point, they're early 20s. They're young. It's like, I think it was what was to be their fourth album. And so he says, come on down to this SIR showcase. They're going to play, a 15, 20-minute set for some record execs. And I happen to know a couple of the guys there. I think Tony Berg was at that showcase. And they basically played, and they just played a 4-song set. And afterwards, I met them, and the manager's like, this is John. This is the guy I was telling you about. And they're like, oh, so we're going to start on Monday, right? And I said, really? Great. I mean, absolutely. I'm ready to go. I mean, it's like, okay, cool. Well, you just got to find a studio. And I mean, it was like that. They just put their trust in their manager. And I don't know, there wasn't much at that point. All they could look at for me was I had done Andrew WK, I Get Wet album, and I think a Semisonic album that wasn't that huge, and nothing like, it wasn't like we're going to go get the guy who did. It was just, they just took a shot, to be honest. And I think, I don't know if it was just I was available or what, but the manager liked me, and we just booked. They said we have a 12-day opening before we go on tour coming up in April. This was 2002. So I booked a studio called Sage and Sound in Hollywood. It was a long, skinny studio with not that big of a drum sound. It was pretty much of a dry jazz room, like pretty small, I'd say. So the room mics on the drums didn't have a lot of vibe to them, but it was available. It was cheap, and we went in there. They had an API console, and he sent me demos, and those were Dare You to Move, Meant to Live, More Than Fine. You know the list. And at that point, John, the singer, had been working on, I think, like a Roland 8-tracky box thing that was hard to export tracks off of. It wasn't a computer system yet. It was like a self-standing box. But we figured out a way to export some of the cool sound effects that he had worked on. So a lot of what you hear that sounds like super psychedelic, sonic effects was from his demos.
Wow.
So on songs like Beautiful Letdown or This Is Your Life, we pulled a lot of stuff off their demos, and I would jam it into Pro Tools and, place it. And, this at this point, I don't even know if the tempos worked at that point, but this was 2002. I at that point, was kind of hybrid. I used to mix on consoles, but recorded in Pro Tools, so I hadn't gone fully in the box yet. And the band was intent on recording bass and drums to analog tape. So we went to a studio that had that, and we cut most of that record, bass and drums, to 2-inch. And except for the two songs that were not cut to 2-inch were Meant to Live and Dare You to Move, because the first song we cut was Meant to Live, and we did an A-B comparison. Let's do tape and let's do direct Pro Tools and A-B them and see which sounds better. And by the time we were done doing the digital version of the drums on Meant to Live, I was like, why are we going to redo this? Let's keep this. So we did. But for the rest of the songs, we ended up liking the tape sound. So we would use, I would take, we would make a map of the song with a vocal and a guitar, just a minimal arrangement, and I would print it 3 or 4 times on one reel of 2-inch tape, and then we would cut 3 passes of drums and bass, and then we would dump all that in, and then I would edit from that. And then from then on, it was all in the box. But all of it was made at that recording studio in 11 days. It was 1 song per day, and they then left on tour, and we didn't do Dare You to Move at that point, because the A&R guy during this time they had signed to Columbia Records and the A&R guy said, I want to redo that song Dare You to Move, which was on their previous record. And so we booked, 2 or 3 weeks later, we booked 1 day of studio time at NRG Studio A, which is one of my favorite recording drum rooms ever.
Yeah.
And cut that song there in 1 day, and used some of the stuff from some of the keyboard effects from the earlier record, but all of it was, otherwise it was all new. And then I mixed the whole record at Larrabee Studio myself on an SSL, and we finished on it was probably about May 31st of that year, and passed in all the mixes. And at that point, the A&R guy said, hey, let's get Tom Lord Alge to do a couple mixes. So Tom did This Is Your Life and Dare You to Move. JJP mixed The Beautiful Letdown, that other amazing song, More Than Fine, and there's like a ballad on there. I can't remember the name of it.
Was that the
amazing.
Fire song?
Fire.
Yeah.
And those 3, and I did those with Jack over at his place at Ocean Way, and the original version of the album was that. And then when Meant to Live became the single, they sent us to Chris Lord Alge, and he did that song. So there's some versions of the record with my mix and some with his. His has a lot more treble, so you'll know the guitars.
So
but they're both, it's a great mix.
But people who are listening on Spotify or whatever today, I assume they're just hearing the CLA version?
Probably. Yeah. But the original printing of the CDs were my mix of that song. But the rest of the record, so it's probably 6 outside mixes and 6 of mine is what I guess. Yeah. And that record came out later that year. I had a great time working with them. At that point, it was John and Tim, the brothers, and Jerome on keyboards, and Chad on drums. And really I don't think there was any outside musicians, maybe a string player or 2. And that was it. And I just kind of went on with my life and started making other records and working, living in LA. Other great things were coming my way. And I don't know, about a year later, I get a call from my manager. He's like, hey, that Switchfoot record you did, it's selling 35,000 a week. I said, what does that mean? He's like, it's top 20 or whatever. And the single is top 10 on rock radio. I was like, this is crazy. So I really wasn't watching. And it just was great timing for them. 2002, 2003, and Meant to Live kind of got on all the rock stations, and their tours got bigger, and it took off. And I'm really, really proud of that record. And soon after, they were like, hey, let's make the next one. So I remember meeting them at Starstruck Studio in Nashville. Somewhere around 2004, and they're like, we have one day off. Can we meet at a studio? So I booked Starstruck, which I don't know if you've been there, but it's a fantastic.
Yeah, we actually have a little office there.
Oh, that big room with the glass?
No, it's not the fog. It's a little writing room we've got up there.
Oh yeah, no, that room was an amazing drum.
Yeah, it's a good studio. It's a good studio.
We cut the song "Stars" there.
Oh wow!
Just that one song, do did and do did and do did.
It's a great riff.
And that was kind of the beginning of the second record, and then that's a whole other story. But that's where the Nothing Is Sound started around then. But it really changed my life because soon after that, when Switchfoot and when Daring to Move came out and kind of took over, a lot of people started calling and saying, "I want the guy that worked on that song," and that was not what I thought. I thought it was going to be Coldplay and Radiohead, and it turned out it was Clay Aiken and the Backstreet Boys, and records, pop records. I mean, it was people who loved that song, and so. But I thought I was going to go down this, more experimental rock path, and it turned into this pop world, and that kind of led me to working in LA with a lot of these kind of singers where it wasn't a band. It was just, and then I would become the band, or I would hire the band with my pals, my musician pals, and make a song that sounds like a band, but Clay Aiken is singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that opened up a whole new world for me too, because I really hadn't done a lot of that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, the genre diversity of it all is really impressive. And what would you say? I know there's a lot of conventional wisdom that says you really want to like get in and specialize in something like that, have that thing you're good at. It sounds like in your case that really wasn't part of your journey. If somebody's coming up now as a new producer writer, I mean, how do you kind of advise them if they're talking about like finding their lane and like where do I?
So I think things are so different now. Like when I was coming up, it wasn't about writing a song and getting someone to sing it and sing on your track. And like it was less. I mean, yes, publishing was huge, but I wasn't writing songs with Switchfoot. You didn't do that. Like, hey, you got the new Radiohead record. Okay, well, what are we going to co-write? No, it doesn't happen. Bands write their own songs. That's why the Beatles are the Beatles.
Yeah.
They don't write with the producer. That's not what happens. Now it does because the business has changed. But back then it was not normal. And to be co-writing, and it was actually kind of frowned upon by the general scene. Was like, you don't co-write with the bands. They have their own publishing deal. It's their songs. I mean, that never happened for me until the temperature started changing in about 2005, 6, 7, around there, and that's when I met the Disney people, and that's kind of changed my thought process on that, where they were like, "We need you to write. We want you to write. Do you have any songs for Selena Gomez?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah," and I'd go, "Quick, write one." So, because at that point you realize I am having these opportunities to write, and I had always written in my bands and everything, but it wasn't my focus. So how do you focus on something that you're good at? I mean, now I feel like the thing is you write songs and you produce them and you try to get a superstar to sing them. I mean, I think that's the vibe now. And as a producer, that is,
sure.
So, because it's not like you're going to get a lot of jobs where it's like, okay, you got the new album and these 12 songs are done. Now you produce them. It's just so rare these days that happens. I'm sure it does. But so how to focus, all I can say now is just know how to, one thing I tell younger producer engineers, just learn how to cut vocals, learn how to work with vocalists, learn how to sing yourself. If you don't sing, good luck to you, because it's like, if you really don't know how to sing, or at least even if you don't sound great, you should be able to deliver a vocal and understand why and how to change someone's, how to suggest a change to someone's delivery to make it either more believable or just less lame or whatever, and then how to, and I'm not talking about like, okay, we'll put like doubles on the chorus and pan them on the outside. I just mean like literally ends of words, falling off words, scooping up, understanding all, like sing your own vocal, put it in Melodyne and look at it and look what's happening. It's like, this goes up, that goes down, like follow it, move it around, get the best singer you can in to sing, and try to like work with just the most talented people you can to really understand how it works. But that, to me, that's the I don't know, the real deal is when you, like, the vocal production. It's like all the loops and the splice. It's just like, it doesn't matter at all. None of that matters. It's singing is what matters. And, there's so much music out there where it doesn't matter. My daughter loves a lot of songs by bands like 100 Gex. And it's like video games, kind of super distorted, super processed, 3 octaves higher than you're actually singing, on purpose. It's fun, but it's not like singing. And at the end of the day, that is an important process to learn how to do that. And all the drum sounds and the samples, it just, yes, it's all out there. Everyone can do that. That's the easy part. To me, it's the working with musicians and working with singers. And the only way to really get good at it is to do it a lot.
Yeah. Well, and just even looking through like your all music credits, I mean, you had a lot of stuff on there back from 1992 before that beautiful Letdown record. Like, oh, yeah. I'm still scrolling. Like, we're
talking every day since I moved here in 1988 or whatever. I was in the studio, and I mean, that's the ones that are released, Seth.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, a lot of them are just like local demo things, and so. But really, that's what it is. I mean, if you have a studio, I'd be working in it. If you want to do this, I would, have a studio in your basement or wherever it is, and just invite people over and just make songs or do them long distance or whatever. But just do it every day, all day long, and I guarantee you'll get good.
Yep. That's such good advice. One thing we say at Full Circle Music is that dare to suck. That's like our mantra. Just dare to suck. Would you say the same goes when you're working with artists and studio musicians and singers? Like, how do you kind of create that safe space for them to...
Taking chances? I mean, I'm fast at working, so I would say, like, I like it to go fast. I think the artists I work with like that it goes fast. I'm not spending a lot of time comparing microphones and A-Bing snare drums, and, I just have things that work, and I like to work fast. Not to say that I don't like experimentation, but on the musical side, that's where it should happen. But just take a shot, like go higher this time, just try something different that you would never try. And just, there's a lot of people that kind of like, okay, now we have the dirty guitars, now we do the cleans, now we do the high ones with the dotted eighth note delay, now we do, it's like there's certain producers that do that, and like then they have all their bases covered, and it's like, and we need 2 doubled on the outsides just in case. Okay, now the acoustics, all right, now the tambourine, now the shaker, now the loops, now the keyboards that go, it's just like, I'm guilty too, to be honest. I mean, but as I got older and older, I just kind of like whittled it down to like, what does this song need? Let's do it right now. That's it. I don't take extra takes. I don't take 80 vocal takes. I take as few vocal takes as necessary. That could be 2, that could be 4, and punch in the second verse twice, and that's it. There's no like, and that's the other thing. I don't like to do it later, comping, and even on guitars, I don't like to open it later and fix later. I want to do it right now, sitting next to the artist. I comp every vocal with the artist.
Yeah.
They're sitting there singing at the mic, and I play back the verse that we just did. How's that? Well, what about that line? And I literally am dragging new options in, and we're playing it back, and there's reverb on it, and there's compression, and it sounds like a record. And we're making that decision right there. Not to say that we might not fix it the next day or whatever, but the idea is let's do it together. Let's both be happy. I'd never like to work on something and then spring it on them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is so just terrible.
Man, you're making me feel a lot better about my process, because I do a lot of the same things, and obviously not to the level of what you're doing, but like my process is fast and furious. I think I don't know how some people kind of hole up for like a month and then they work on it and then they kick out a mix and then
right.
Here's your.
I've heard stories of guys like that, like Mutt Lange, who 2 years to make Photographed by Def Leppard or whatever. But and it is amazing. That's the thing, and it's not overproduced. It's just perfect. But I've just found my temperament is I can't hang that long.
Yeah.
Doing this, and I certainly don't want to do it later. I just want this to be done right now, and so I don't know if it's impatience or just I want to hear the record now. I don't want to like do it later.
Yeah, well, dude. I'm exactly the same
but
way.
But on all instruments, I mean, just on everything. Just again,
right.
just as few. I don't take safety takes. Let's just get one more just in case. I just don't.
Yeah. Just do it good and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Do you think it's worth it to learn new DAWs, plugins, software instruments, or should you kind of just stick to what you know and be more efficient? Like what's your view on that?
I've been saying I was going to learn Ableton for the last 6 months and I never opened it, but I have it. So, for me, my suggestion is get really familiar with one and just get great at it and just stick with it. I think other people, if you have the mentality where you can actually be great at Pro Tools and also know Ableton or Logic, do it. Because I know people that tell me that they switched over from Pro Tools over to Logic and like, it's so great for writing. It's so great. I say, well, what about editing a vocal? And they're saying it's great, but I don't think I could do it. I'm so fast at Pro Tools at this point with the quick keys and just knowing where everything is that it's like, it's kind of my reading music, if you will. I'm not sure that I could ever switch to anything else, regardless of the benefits, because how fast and familiar I am with the program.
It's a great answer. Well, man, we've talked a lot about Switchfoot. I mean, there is so much other just huge records, amazing records from Ben Rector and Parachute and more Switchfoot and 10th Avenue North, Soul Asylum, all kinds of stuff that we could totally dive into all day long. But
do it if you want.
I know you're a busy man. So what I would love to just do is, encourage people to go to John's all music page and just do a deep dive. Listen to all the records. The breadth and width of the genres that he's working in is just inspiring. So go check out his all music page. We'll make a link in the show notes for this. Before we jump into our lightning round and before we do our deep dive, which I do want to do our deep dive on working on remote sessions. I know even before this whole COVID pandemic, you were already doing it. Mm-hmm. So I want to touch on that in our deep dive. And if people are interested in that, they can go to madeitmusic.com and register for the deep dives. But before we close out, is there a piece of advice that you would like to give to people who are listening to this who want to do this for a living?
Is there a piece of advice? Well, just do it every day. You might have a day job or you might have to have other responsibilities and all that, but you need to do it every day to get good.
Yeah.
I guess.
It's good advice.
Repetition.
Yep. Get the reps in. All right. Well, let's jump into our lightning round. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Top 3 things in your recording rig that you could not live without.
1176 compressor. Could not live without. Juno 60 synth. And recording rig, not music rig. Okay.
No, that's good. That counts. That counts.
And then Ludwig Black Beauty snare.
Awesome. Well said. What's your favorite / most used app on your phone? Doesn't have to be music related.
What do I use the most on my phone? I got to look at it for 1 second. Let's see. What's in the front? Podcasts.
Awesome. That's probably mine too.
Yeah.
What item is always in your fridge?
Oat milk creamer for coffee.
Is it the Oatly kind?
Yep, I love that. It's kind of a new thing because it used to be the silk.
Yeah. My wife is from Sweden, and so I discovered that stuff like 7 years ago. It's awesome.
Yeah,
really good if people are lactose intolerant out there. What was the first album you bought, and why did you buy it?
I was given records. That's the thing, because my uncle gave me just a ton of stuff. But it was probably Beatles, and just because they're the greatest band of all time, and you want to learn how to make records, you want to learn how to write songs, you want to learn how to be a band, Beatles.
Yeah, there it is. And lastly, what advice would you give your younger self?
Talk less.
Listen more, talk less.
Maybe. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Well, John, this has been an absolute blast. We will link to, your socials, your AllMusic page. Is there anything that you're working on that you want to share with people before we sign off?
I don't know how timely this is. That's the thing. But, been working on some really cool stuff with Ben Rector lately, remotely, and we can get into that in your remote session.
In the deep dive, yeah. That's awesome.
But just really stoked on the new Ben material.
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure, regardless of when this comes out, that there's definitely links to all of that. So, John, seriously appreciate you being here with us on the Made It in Music podcast today.
Thanks, Seth.
What's up? Thank you for watching the Made It in Music podcast season 3. If you want to check out any of the other episodes from season 3, click up here. And we talk in the show about these really cool deep dives with all this extra bonus content. And if you want access to all of those, click here.